like I said, relax, be yourself. It really is a conversation. There's no right or wrong answer. Everything that you say is valuable insight for us here at Global Compact, and also our participants listening in as well. So, like I said, casual conversation, and we're just going to be talking about Global Goal 2, which is zero hunger. So I want to start basically just trying to get under the hood, as it were, inside your mind and inside your heart as well, and understand what the SDGs mean to you individually. So Ayesha, let's start with you. Why are the SDGs important to you? Why do they make you excited or passionate about changing the
world? Thank you, Zubair, so much for having me on this conversation with Salman and our audience listening today. On a very personal level, as a Pakistani, I feel incredibly motivated to contribute to our sustainable development goals because Pakistan is a middle-income country. We are a nuclear power. We are the sixth most populous country in the world. And when I've traveled around the world, I always come back thinking, my God, we've got so many resources and great minds, great natural resources. And we just have to keep improving the way we manage our affairs. So for me, I feel motivated to contribute to the SDGs because I feel it is possible. Fundamentally, I feel change is possible. And, not to forget that Pakistan did achieve its Millennium Development Goal for halving income poverty some years ago. And that was in our lifetime. Including in our lifetime, there have been countries like Thailand who have achieved their, poverty reduction targets. So I think change is possible. It's very easy to get hopeless and always complain, but I'd rather focus on the glass half full and keep soldiering on because I think that this is what life is about.
Salman, what's your view? Why are the SDGs important to you personally?
Assalamu alaikum. Zubair bhai, thank you so very much for having me on this conversation. It's pretty important conversation. So now, the reason why I believe that SDGs pose the importance to all of us is that the unified way that the way they bring us all together. You see, they speak a lot of common sense compared to the MDGs that were there earlier. So they were pretty vague in nature, and the governments weren't able to achieve them, and probably that was the reason why people couldn't make sense out of it. But when SDGs came in, I saw a complete change in the Pakistani corporate culture. I saw a complete change in the narrative of a lot of organizations globally. When we talk about globalization, we see a common language, and we seek a common language. So what I see, for example, at the United Nations Global Compact, submitting a communication on progress is one of the key roles that corporates have to actually achieve to, achieve their own, retain their memberships. What I've seen is if you look at some company in Nigeria and you see their COP, or you see COP of, for example, a company in Canada or elsewhere, in any part of the world, they'll be speaking a common language. No poverty, zero hunger. They'll be talking about education, women empowerment. And I guess this is the practical side of the SDGs that makes it so practical that people think that it's so achievable, that we are not 10 years left, it's nearly 9 complete years left towards achieving those goals. But we see going somewhere since the past 2-3 years. I mean, things have changed so rapidly that the past 2-3 years has been a roller coaster. If I compare that from the other past 2015 and onwards. So in that way, to me, SDGs is important in the corporate sector. SDGs have brought, let's say, a common language to the CSR programs. Usually when corporations who are not even part of the UN Global Compact, I've seen them more concerned about achieving SDGs, even though they should be part of the, the local network. First, I always encourage them to be part of the local network and you gain the benefits out of them. And big data is the important thing. So you post your data and you get benefits out of it. And so does the, the academia and the local network and everything. So we can start posting that data that for the good work that they're doing. And that's probably what we're trying to do since the past several years by training people to be part of the compact and all that. So I guess it's the unique language, the common language that we all
Yeah,
speak.
yeah.
So
I
this is
guess
what I like.
the sense I'm getting from you, Salman, is that it's like a Zakir, a common language. It's a framework that unites us all. So it's the same
True.
terminology that everyone's using, and it's the same benchmark that everyone's using. And just
Absolutely.
what I was saying as well, I get the sense that both of you are excited about being involved in the SDGs, and that excites us at Global Compact, because it means if we've got champions like you who feel energized and excited around the SDGs, that is going to be infectious and follow through not only in your organizations, but in the people that you have contact with, so your wider stakeholders as well. So I'm really, really excited about that. And that's obviously a more deeper conversation to have as into what motivates you. And we'll come back to that in due course in another session. So we've understood a little bit about, what's exciting you and what's motivating you. I guess this sense of purpose, this sense of kuch karna chahiye, meri zimmedari bhi banti hai, all these adages about doing the right thing. And I think, like you said, Salman, the SDGs now provide a little bit of a better structured framework for people, who are looking to do more, whether through their organizations or whether individually as well. And I think that's the beauty of the SDGs. Just moving slightly forward from that, in terms of your organizations, can you give a brief kind of overview of the journey that you've taken in adopting the SDGs? So what we're interested to learn is not so much the success, because we can see that's evident from your COP and from the work that you're doing publicly, but also from the progress that you're making, but a little bit more about the journey you've taken in terms of addressing some of the challenges. So for example, that could be, did you have to put forward a business case? Did you have to convince your senior leaders that this is the right process and this is the right thing to do above and beyond traditional corporate philanthropy or responsibility? Did you have to work a little bit harder to push the idea of adoption of the SDGs? And the reason I ask that is that because there are many people who are on this journey of the SDGs, or who are about to start the journey of the SDGs, and are facing some challenges. That's not to say that they're problems. They're challenges that we can overcome. So having your insights as to reflecting back, koi aisa koi mauka mila aapko where you were able to, move forward from that challenge, that would then give some reassurance to people listening in now and later. And this is normal, because remember, businesses have got to think from many different viewpoints. There's profitability, there's also income generation, there's people development, there's the environment, there's society, there's responsibility, and then there's also philanthropy as well. So is there a time, Salman, we'll start with you, where you can think of where you had some challenges, and what was the solution, or how did you overcome them within the organization?
Okay. Thank you. CSR had been a journey for us. I mean, we're an organization that is 44 years old, and it's a pretty long time for an organization in Pakistan to exist. And being involved in the energy infrastructure, we've got a larger footprint. So we had to, convince not only the internal stakeholders, we had a lot of responsibility towards the external stakeholders. So now, having said that, what happened was we began our journey from normal corporate philanthropy, just the way the authors would put it up, and that's how it graduated towards from corporate philanthropy towards creating a shared value culture. So it took us a long time towards approaching the creating shared value part. So the shared value really made things a lot easier. How?
Okay.
For example, it's basically the society that usually asks for the initiatives that you can take. Actually, it gets pretty simple. It gets pretty easier. You don't pose what you need to do. You need to do what you need that needs to be done. Society कई बार आपसे derive करवाती है. I'll give you an example. This was few years back, somewhere in 2011ish. We developed a campus. Even before that, 2008, I guess, 4 and 8. We developed a primary school in partnering with the Citizens Foundation. Now, the Citizens Foundation, as I guess we all know, is a very reputed NGO that works in the area of education, and they build schools, purpose-built, developed schools, and their curriculum is excellent compared to any of the private institutions. So we had them on board, and we developed and we invested a campus, a primary education campus at Kasba, Gujarat, near our refinery. After several years, when few batches passed out, the society came back to us. The communities came back to us and they said, you've put up, आपने सिर्फ primary school तो बना दिया, secondary school में, government school में जाता है बच्चा तो उसको तो वो माहौल ही नहीं मिल पाता है. हम तो नासा की बात कर रहे थे और बच्चा जाके गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में जाता है तो उसको तो नासा की स्पेलिंग भी नहीं पढ़ना आती, क्लास 6 के बच्चे को उसकी तो वो एजुकेशन ही नहीं हुई हुई. तो यू कंप्लीट आवर स्कूलिंग सिस्टम बाय डेवलपिंग अ सेकेंडरी स्कूल. एंड within like 3 years of their demand, a secondary school was there, operational, with TCF in 2012. And by 2 years later, we doubled the capacity of the primary school. Now, what happened here? In the process, we were supporting quality education. Number of SDGs were being supported at that point in time. You can connect the dots. But what had happened actually, literally your CSR programs will be driven by common sense. If you put a common sense, at the end of the day, the common sense prevails and the community wins and so does the corporates win. But when you are inept for a picture show, by cleaning a beach just for the sake of one day for 2 hours, and all the pictures are taken, and then your corporate newsletters are all filled up with a flashy, one shirt, one breeze, one planet, and all that. There is a certain catch to it. So the system of this earth is as such: you feed in garbage, you get garbage. Whatever your intentions are, whatever that your intentions are, if it is pure, it will reflect. If it is not pure, it will still reflect, no matter what you do and not. So the things are pretty easy. To me, things are pretty easy. So when the project is feasible, it's manageable, it's profitable, and when its deliverables help in a common sense way, and the communities benefit, and what did we achieve out of all this? We achieved a good faith.
Yeah.
And
so I guess what you're saying, Salman, sorry, I guess what you're saying is that if you derive any initiative from a what's the impact perspective, iska kya
impact
fayda hai, I'm going to say it literally, kya fayda hai, but look at it from a beneficiary perspective and then kind of ecosystem break it down. Ke hamara bhi kya fayda hai from a profit perspective? There may not be any. Hamara kya fayda hai from a looking good perspective as well, because PRB, it's an important aesthetic as well. What's the value add of benefit community, to the people that we're servicing, to our own people, to the environment, etc., etc. वो पूरा एक circle बन जाता है, and I guess then that makes it easy. It's good to learn
what values all about. Yeah.
I agree, and I think it's a good example, a demonstrable example of how to put forward a business case. So if there are people who are struggling or finding some challenges with putting forward the business case, then here's one methodology to use. Look at all, and it doesn't have to be that every aspect of that circle has to have high level impact, but there should be impact in all of them. Ayesha, what's been your view? Obviously, you come from a slightly different end of the spectrum, as it were. Aapka ek nazariya different hai. You work at the impact level from a different perspective. Did you have any challenges, or were there any moments where you had to convince the people that you were working alongside, whether internally or externally, about कि नहीं हमें भी SDGs करना चाहिए, अब हम ठीक है हम poverty पे तो काम कर रहे, but it's a much bigger issue than just one aspect of doing good, right? There's a lot more to it. So were there any moments that you had along the journey?
Certainly, Zubair, and I'll just sort of, first of all, as you said, Pakistan Poverty Alleviation is a mission-driven organization with the purpose to alleviate poverty in Pakistan, right? So our goal is very clear on that, and by virtue of that, we were the early adopters of the SDGs and aligned all our programs and our log films and all that to making sure that we are able to measure our contribution to the SDGs in a transparent and meaningful way, and continuously learn along the way as well about which of our interactions are having more impact than others. So the learning culture at PPAF is really, really important to making sure that we are contributing meaningfully on SDGs. In terms of, convincing others outside the sector, I'll draw on my experience in my work in other organizations in a large global NGO, where we were very concerned about SDG 5, about gender equality. And if you remember, SDG 5 has a target of 5.2 on ending all forms of violence against women and girls, right? Now, we were working with the ILO and other coalition partners around the world to mobilize private sector, trade unions, employers' federations, workers' federations in so many countries to get them to support the new ILO Convention C-130 on ending workforce harassment and violence. Now, when we started talking to some of the private sector, we had some very interesting feedback. Well, this is a domestic issue. This violence against women doesn't happen in the workplace. What are you talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a very typical response. And, one of the ways to counter that is real stories and really showing some of the challenges women and men workers both face in the workplace, and some very difficult conversations had to be had on that. And then the second thing that I found useful was showing hard data. So we commissioned a economic cost of violence against women study in a number of garment factories around the world to show, well, you're employing so many women workers that are linked to global supply chains. These are the issues you're facing. So when you're doing reporting on your compliance status against SDGs and getting big bulk orders from so-called Western countries, this is not going to fly beyond a certain point. So really doing both the carrot and the stick, so appealing to our humanity, but also our compliance angle, which was useful with dealing with private sector, particularly on these harder issues. I find that, sometimes when talking about funding a certain health center or education facility, as Salman said, this appeals on CSR levels, right? But when you're talking about some harder issues where it requires changing core business practices, right? But really changing the way you procure your goods and services, the way you treat your workers, that is much harder and requires much more sustained effort and campaigning.
And I guess, just using that point there, that it is difficult, and we understand and appreciate that, because business was set up very differently, perhaps, with a mission in mind, or an organization was set up with a mission in mind, and then along come all of these world's problems. I think they were always there. Hamesha se wahi hai, lekin uski jo amplification of the real issues behind it perhaps have become a little bit more accessible and visual. So, you talk about 5.2, for example. And I think, just going back to your point, Salman, from earlier as well, that I think that's the great thing about the SDGs for those people who are thinking about it, that it gives you a stop moment to reflect and think, okay, hum jo business kar rahe hai, can we align? And some of the things are very easy to align, even without going through that whole ecosystem. And some of the things are difficult to align, because it means you reflecting and thinking, okay, now I have a decision to make. क्या हमें इस journey पे जाना है आगे? That means we're going to have to change our policies, maybe our suppliers, maybe the way we work. Maybe that means infrastructure change. But I think what is prevalent is that those problems won't go away until we all work together. And you talked about shared value, and we'll talk about, what can we do collectively, sort of later on in the conversation. But it's interesting to learn from you that despite all of the challenges that you've experienced, whether internally or externally through other organizations, that you're still on the SDG journey yourselves and you're still championing it. And that brings me to, why is it that you're championing this particular goal? So Global Goal 2, which is all about poverty. And we've got some, really kind of insightful statistics that we know that if we can address zero hunger positively, it impacts our economies, our health, our education, equality even as well, and social development. And we've understood that hunger is limiting human development, from a nutritional perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective as well. Talk about education, health, and gender equality. So we're going to try and figure out why this whole notion of SDG 2 and zero hunger is important, but why is it important to you guys particularly? Again, from an organization perspective or an individual perspective, I shall just go back to you. आपके लिए किसमें क्या है goal 2 के अंदर that's exciting you? You're here on this conversation today. Clearly, you have something to say. What is it that we tap into that can be infectious for other people as well positively? Agar Ayesha or Salman be goal 2 पे काम करे, या करना चाहिए, my organization should be adopting, because I get what these guys are saying. Why is goal 2 important for you?
I think goal 2 gives us a big sense of urgency in Pakistan, and I'd say that as a Pakistani, with being a middle-income country, being the world's 6th most populated country with all our resources, when we look at the stats and we find that 40% of our children are stunted, right? That there are basically 12 million children in Pakistan whose growth is impaired. How can we expect a productive workforce and our GDP growth in a sustainable way to reach our national development potential? So I think this is something so fundamental, and just that very hard reality when we look at our National Nutrition Survey and then the findings that come out of that really jolt us to action. I don't think that any one of us can not be touched by that. It is about not only the current nutrition crisis we're facing in some parts of the country, it is more acute than others, but also it's very, very dire potential consequences for our future country's growth. And I think it encompasses so much. Pakistan is a country where 21% of our economy is dependent on agriculture, right? And agriculture employs 44% of our national workforce. So when we talk about even SDG 1, which is about no poverty, you can't address that until you address the needs when we talk about poverty alleviation, it forces us to actually be worried about this segment of our society in particular, and really, really working hard to increase their income potential. So SDG 2 really has 2 components, right? So there's work that we need to do on addressing nutrition, and those are really addressing underlying causes, but also the symptoms of malnutrition and undernourishment. But then and afford a better health status in the long run.
Do you think, the zero hunger is not just about feeding people, right? It's much more than that. Social protection issues, food security, the availability, obviously nutrition, and you talked about agriculture. Do you think it's just as simple, let me frame the question differently. Agar hum har koi, so everyone, when we talk about shared value and collective support or working collectively or in.
Sorry, Zubair,
with a
lost you
vision.
for the last 10 seconds. Could you just repeat the last bit?
So I'm just going to reframe my question. And basically I'm asking is, if there are people listening in now or later who think this is great, or realization that zero poverty is achievable, or I want to do something for zero poverty, but I can't do anything in social protection, I can't do anything to achieve food security, I can't really do anything about nutrition or sustainable agriculture because I'm not that level, or I don't know where to start. What would be the one thing that they could do that you could just advise, just a quick thought from your head? क्या ऐसी कोई चीज़ है जो कोई इंसान कर सकता है, that would just make the first step of making a difference in your experience?
I think responsible consumer behavior. If there's one thing we can do is responsible consumer behavior. And that's just changing where we buy our food, buying. When we are importing fancy milk from Australian cows and so on, right? And that's just not something that is helpful for our agriculture sector. Every time we purchase an imported food item, we are undercutting our local produce and the
I think just Wi-Fi relay. Ayesha, can you hear us?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you.
I think there's just a Wi-Fi area. So just to echo what you're saying and recap that we need to reduce food waste. We need to be sensible about where we're buying from. So maybe we, not saying become nationalistic, but maybe we look at where our products are coming from as well and support maybe local produce, whether that be from national organizations or whether that be from farms. And obviously encourage nutritional conversations, at least at the home level, whether that be through your immediate family or your domestic employees, and think, are they having the right kind of foods, so, whether that's fruit or vegetable, etc. Salman, what's your passion around this particular goal? Because I know we've talked earlier as well, and you get excited about all of the global goals, but this one particularly, what does it mean? What does it mean to you personally? Why are you excited about addressing zero hunger?
So, Zubair, the thing is, it's not just about when we hear the fact that it's zero hunger. So zero hunger doesn't mean dastarkhan, free meals, or that feed a child. Program that you and we have enrolled our charity towards and all that. So it's just not that. It is that, but it is just not that. It is so much more. So I'll give you an example. As a corporation, the company makes profits by the operations that it does and by the company's employees, the human capital that puts in all the good work that they do. And once these people get paid, they go home, they start spending. That's where the responsible spending comes in place. And then they live in the society which is similar to any other society. So what happens is, when there is a huge impact of hunger in a particular sect of the same society, it hurts everyone. Now, this is one thing that everyone must realize, that it will hurt you, it will hurt me, it will hurt our children eventually. जिसका पेट खाली होता है वो या तो भूख से मरेगा, उसके पास दो ही चॉइसेस हैं, या वो किसी से छीन के खाएगा. And this is practically what we are witnessing here in Pakistan. या तो लोग छीन रहे हैं या तो लोग मर रहे हैं, और दरमियान का जो ग्रे लाइन है उसमें है दस्तरखान, जो कि कराची में मैं हर जगह देखता हूँ. और जब मैं दस्तरखान देखता हूँ तो फिर मैं अग्री भी करता हूँ और मैं डिसअग्री भी करता हूँ. मैं अग्री इसलिए करता हूँ क्योंकि मैं देखता हूँ कि हमारे यहाँ महंगाई बहुत बढ़ गई है, हमारे यहाँ इन्फ्लेशन बेतहाशा बढ़ चुकी है. एंड आई गेस The ball is out of the court now. I don't know how it's gonna get managed, but it's a very बहुत ही scary situation हो गई है पाकिस्तान में overall. Karachi in particular, चूंकि मैं यहाँ रहता हूँ, and then I see how stuff works. What I see is that the only one part of the equation in solving this equation, zero hunger, is by the Dastakhan. But that is not only the thing. The next phase that must work in parallel to the Dastakhan is entrepreneurship. See, the one thing that Pakistanis do miss, that every NGO, that every corporation, everyone, even the academia misses, is capturing big data. Why is it that every second good study that we see is either UK funded or US funded or Australia funded or funded by XYZ but not a Pakistani? Why? Because everyone is interested in that data. Why? Yesterday I was passing by Hassan Square and I saw a sweeper with a smartphone worth $15,000. Now my problem is not the smartphone. My problem is, am I or someone in our society is able to capture his data, his spending patterns? I mean, there's so much that you can get. Somebody who's coming, for example, at that Dastakhan for one free meal, all you can do is make ke wahan ek banda bithaye, ask him 6 questions. What do you do? How much kids you have? Who else is there in your family? What is your spending pattern? What is the rent that you pay? What is your phone number? Where do you live? Thank you very much. And you can imagine, multiply that by X amount of people that come every single day, approximately 500 to kahin nahi gaye. You get 500 good data. And then you use that data with organizations and NGOs who are working, specializing towards what? Entrepreneurship. I seldom ask them, why only Karachi? Why not beyond Karachi? Or if Karachi, then what is their census? I mean, what they have gone through. 2017 ke census pe to hum kab tak chalenge? So there is a lot of work that needs to be done on data, and big data is the next big thing in around outside Pakistan. In Pakistan bhi ho sakta hai, lekin agar koi kaam karna chahe to. But there is this big part of missing piece of the puzzle that I see is capturing the big data. That is basically,
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned data, Salman, and again, it's a conversation to have, in more detail. And there's something that you're familiar with called the Voluntary National Review, which forms part of the SDG global reporting map, which Pakistan is involved in as well. This is our second year, and we'll be having a conversation with members. Yeah, so we'll conversation in due course karenge, because that starts in March, and then that's when the Pakistan government presents at the General Assembly in New York its progress, so its COP, as it were. Just building around data, there's some interesting statistics that I've come across, and we've got great friends at the World Food Programme, and Yasir se meri yehi baat ho rahi thi a couple of weeks ago, in preparation for this conversation. He was telling me that this issue of hunger we've discussed is not just around kisi ko khana dena. It's not just dastarkhan. That's one aspect, and that's very important, because agar aap kisi ko khana khila dete ya koi khud khana kha sakta hai, because there's two elements of this. It's not just be charitable, it's empower someone as well, right? Help a man to fish, as it were. That addresses the first issue, like you said, agar tummy cushion, and I won't complete the rest of the sentence. Then that enables you to then start thinking logically, and there's some data and some science behind this as well. When a child has breakfast in the morning, he is then more productive at school, right? So there are other elements as well. And जब हम ये discussion कर रहे थे, वो मुझे बता रहा था कि Zubair, UK के अंदर भी तो ये issue है. I said, I'm aware of that, right? Because food poverty here is really, really big. But the statistic that he shared, and it will shock you, and it's no comparison, but just to give context, this issue around food poverty or zero hunger affects everyone around the globe. And back to your earlier point, that's what the SDGs is doing, bringing everyone together, full circle, ताकि हम सब एक universal language से बात करें. That the UK population, 14% of families are in food poverty. So या तो उनके पास खाने को खाना नहीं है, literally, and they might be from middle class families as well, but they're just struggling to make ends meet. And if you put that into the context in a country like Pakistan with all of its other challenges and opportunities as well, it's scary to think, really, really scary to think कि क्या इसका है. So he was telling me that they have a vision, 5 steps to zero hunger. We've touched upon some of these. Governments need to expand social protection schemes for the most vulnerable. So that's one element. Providing opportunity for equitable economic growth. So providing other access and creating inclusivity in the whole food system. But the biggest thing I think is that nutrition, as you mentioned, Ayesha, is one thing, because that will go a long way. So we also need to sort of all collectively work on that as well. And then looking at ways where food is becoming more accessible. So there's food scarcity as well. So that's the shortage of food, but also the lack of availability of food as well. So ye cheezein bhi humne dekhna hai. You talked about share a meal, Salman, your dastarkhan. And I think, there are people listening in that, and I just echo that Salman is not saying कि किसी को खाना नहीं खिला. वो भी एक चीज है, वो भी एक important चीज है, and you can feed a child something nutritious for about 100 rupees in Pakistan. So if you get the opportunity to do that, please do that. If you get the opportunity to think for a moment and think, can I give this bacha or this person a nutritious meal? Then I think you've already achieved part of the SDGs just by doing that. So please, I'd encourage that to everyone.
True that.
Obviously, there's a World Food Program hunger map as well that depicts some of those, and Pakistan and countries neighboring us are highlighted quite heavily in terms of the issues and challenges. What is your organization doing, Salman, specifically to address zero hunger? And I'll just caveat that by saying, and Ayesha, something for you to think of as well from a different perspective, is that all of the SDGs are instinctively and intrinsically linked together by design. So if you are looking at addressing SDG 2, which is our conversation today, by default, as Ayesha highlighted, you should end up be also touching upon goal 5, which is gender, and goal 3, which is health and well-being. And naturally, you will end up now looking at this as a holistic, well, काम तो हम कर रहे थे इसके ऊपर, project हमारा इसके ऊपर है, but actually it touches upon these 2 SDGs as well. So we don't necessarily have to do anything specific in that, but we actually tick one of the indicators as well. And then that gives you some confidence about moving along the SDGs, as it were, in terms of all the goals. Salman, PARCO क्या कर रहा है goal 2 के ऊपर? ये बताएं.
Yeah, so I guess you're right, Zubair. The thing is that we all build up on by connecting the dots. So unless you're able to connect the dots, you will not be able to, look at every single, even small towards or a big initiative from a holistic perspective. The key is that whatever that you do has to serve the society well, the communities well, and not just the SDGs, but the society in totality. So talking about my company, for example, we began our program for targeted towards entrepreneurship years back. And what we did was we went, since our footprint is within Sindh and Punjab side, from the interior side, where the 2,000 kilometer oil pipelines do crisscross throughout the country. So what we did was we had access to all these areas like Bubak, Shikarpur, Fazilpur, Rajanpur area, and then Mahmood Court and Kasba, Gujarat, and several areas like such. So what we did was we started this entrepreneurship program by supporting the technical training programs, the technical training programs by the government. The one good thing was that they were good students, they were good teachers. They lacked in tools, they lacked in guidelines, they lacked in several other infrastructure measures, which obviously every government institution does. and we kind of like tried to fill in that gap. And once we did that, we saw a magnificent change within the overall structure of that society. What we saw was that the learning outcomes were amazing. They increased. And koi agar, for example, 6 months ka course ki quality of human capital from before our help and after our help had a very different approach. The quality increased many folds. जब उसके पास प्रैक्टिकल करने के लिए टूल्स ही नहीं होंगे तो थ्योरी ओनली विल नॉट सर्व द his training course, technical training course. But once he got it, he was able, he or she, both of them, I mean, this was for both men and women. So they were more inclined, and then we supported them to, with an initial support, to begin some work from their home. Say it be men or women. Through toolkits, we're providing sewing and embroidery machines and several stuff like that. So a lot of micro industry. So we started investing into micro industry. So what happened was these women were making money from the comfort of their own homes. तो जो इंटीरियर में पर्दे का मसला होता है और फिर बट स्टिल उस मसले से पेट का मसला तो हल नहीं होता. तो कीपिंग दैट द सोसाइटी norms in view and respecting them, we continued our support, and in doing so, the quality of human resource increased, and entrepreneurs began from there within the comfort of their homes. And we saw the same thing happening with men as well. They have technical toolkits and everything, and then they began their own work rather than going for jobs. क्योंकि jobs के लिए लोग दो ही चीजें देखते हैं, या तो वो देखते हैं कि गवर्नमेंट की तरफ चले जाएं हम, गवर्नमेंट की जॉब्स की नौकरियों की तरफ पॉलिटिकल विल इस्तेमाल करके, या तो फिर हम चले जाएं प्राइवेट इंस्टीट्यूशन में. अब बिजनेस तो पाकिस्तान में बढ़ नहीं रहा, श्रिंक होता जा रहा है. तो वी नीड मोर एंटरप्रेन्योर्स, लाइक आई सेड अर्लियर. यूनिवर्सिटीज के अंदर भी अब वक्त आ गया है, एकेडमिया शुड start making more entrepreneurs rather than good corporate human beings. This is, I guess, the key towards that. अब इससे हुआ क्या, ये जीरो हंगर को कैसे सपोर्ट कर रहा है? वही वाली बात, you teach the man how to fish, and that's what we did. And precisely that has increased many folds. अब उसका quality human, अब आप देखें वो एड अप कैसे करता है सोसाइटी पे. उसकी क्वालिटी लिविंग बेहतर हुई, उसके बच्चे स्कूल भी जाने लग गए, उसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबल स्पेंडिंग भी हो गई. अब वो सोसाइटी पे बोझ भी नहीं है. अब उसकी फैमिली जो है वो ज़कात वगैरह की तरफ नहीं जाती. They're not looking for free meals. So Dastakhan must shrink. That's what my point is. Dastakhan must shrink, and it will shrink if you start taking stuff in parallel. This is also important. Dastakhan is also important, but you need to work in parallel towards developing skills. So we've got a huge population, and the growth is 2.5% per annum, which is remarkable. But where is the quality? So we need to fit in that quality missing puzzle. Once we do that, ये सारे goals आपके achieve होना शुरू हो जाएंगे.
Good. Okay, that's very helpful and some food for thought there. Ayesha, what's the organization you're attached with, Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, doing to further or champion goal 2?
So Zubair, we do a lot of work in this area, particularly to boost rural agriculture dependent households' incomes, right? I'll describe a few the types of work we do now under our flagship National Poverty Graduation program, which is in all 4 provinces in Pakistan across 23 districts. We're assisting over 300,000 households. And our target is to increase income by 30% over the next 4 years. How we do that is through a combination of 3 things, right? Now, 3 components are providing them assets where they don't have any. So this could be in the form of goods, livestock, inputs to set up small shop like a karyane ki dukaan in their village, or a combination of skills training so that they can better use their productive asset, or even their own knowledge base, even if they don't require an asset. Skills is an important area we invest in. And the third component is for those who can afford it is to provide them access to interest-free loans. So because as you know, in rural areas, and Salman here was talking about entrepreneurship development, right? Now, when we talk about enterprise development, particularly in rural areas, it's really important that people have access to finance. And we find that, to really boost rural economies, providing access to affordable finance is important, and without the usual barriers to that. So this is something that our organization specializes in, and since 2008 actually have been doing this tried and tested approach for poverty graduation. The other thing that we're doing a lot of and increasingly wanting to invest more in is supporting rural enterprise development, as I said, through both access to finance, but also a linkage with markets, whether that's a meat value chain or dairy value chain, facilitating women dairy cooperatives in parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa even. So, and we find that there's a lot of uptake, and Salman was talking about data, and I think sometimes we have a lot of data, but how we use that for innovative programming and really pushing the boundaries of transformation is up to us in the private sector and development sector with the government to really think creatively about what is possible. Livestock, for example, is a sector that predominantly is managed by women in their households, and there's nothing stopping us from working with them so that they are able to get the benefit of better education so that they can look after their animals, but also add value to the products that are generated from that value chain and get control over their income. So a lot of work doing to stimulate rural economies by also linking with urban economy, right, with the big supply chains is important. The third thing is, of course, investing in better agricultural practices, using green technologies to improve and diversify crop yields. When we talk about diversification, one of the things that we are piloting is planting olives in Bajor, Chitral, Dil, Zop, so that land that is otherwise wasted can actually benefit. Better irrigation channels for farmland. I'm conscious of time, and we'll just stop there, Zubair.
No, that's fine. And again, like I say, this is just part of the conversation, and iske mazid aage aur bhi hum discussion karenge. I think we have about 5 minutes left. So just a couple of more points really I want to raise, and just very short kind of points or responses from you. We talked about ye sab ki zimmedari hai, organize at an organization level, as a group of people, through this platform, through Global Compact, through corporate responsibility, as citizens of Pakistan, and obviously global citizens in the generic sense as well. What, in your view, can we do more of collectively? Saath hum kya kuch kar sakte hain to really help address this particular issue of Global Goal 2? And like we say, we know it's underpinned by many other assets and facets of ending hunger. It's not just kisi ko khana khilado. That's one part, and that's a very important part. But there are other aspects as well, like social protection and food scarcity and availability as well. What, in your view, Salman? Let's go to you first. What can we do collectively as a community to really achieve Goal 2?
I think, Zubair, I believe that collaboration is the answer. The word collaboration, how and when is very easy. And, if you think in common ways, for example, we're geographically, speaking of corporate sector and the private sector and the government sector and even the NGOs, for example, everyone works in their silos, what I've seen, and they do not collaborate much. Everyone has this competition that I believe even in the corporations, I've seen in the NGOs and all, we must collaborate, geographically speaking. So there are pockets in Karachi. There's a Landi industrial area, there's a Skorangi industrial area, there's a site industrial area. So if these people can collaborate and look at the big data for the population wise and the kind of strata that people are belonging to, and then pick up an area for developing skills, perhaps then we will begin achieving something. I'll give you a very small example, wouldn't take much time. I went to this place near Turbat, and then I was traveling. I was just, wandering by with friends and all. I saw this place that had a black granite marble, huge mountain, and it was amazing place. And the people there, their economics were livestock and collective. Women, travel 10 kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers every single day just to collect water. That was what they did the whole day. और उनमें इतनी ही जान छोड़ी हुई थी कि वो सिर्फ वोट दे सकें. तो it was a moment that I realized that in case if an organization, if somebody who would come in and, those companies who were extracting all those minerals from their land could actually, technically, give skills to these people, perhaps they will end up somewhere safe.
Right.
Pakistan, for example, in terms of कहते हैं ना gems and jewelry, जो कि precious and semi precious stones जो है हमारे यहाँ raw form में मिलते हैं, और उसकी cutting and polishing techniques अभी तक हमारे पास नहीं आई हैं. And few years back our exports were about approximately $500 million, whereas compared to our neighbors in India, they have no raw material in nature available, but their industry was a few years back 4 billion. Why is that? Because they have the huge facility in Jamnagar where they facilitate all the blood diamonds from Africa and even all the emerald, ruby, topaz and all the semi-precious and precious stones, cutting and polishing सबसे pristine level का human resource वहाँ available है. And people around the globe, they send their raw stones there in Jamnagar to their institute to get it polished and cutting and whatever. So it is the human capital that they invested in years back that reaped their benefits. Probably this is the kind of model that we need to adopt and move ahead. So collaboration.
One I'm hearing is that stop for a moment and think कि अगर ये mission हमने achieve करना है, ये target हमने meet करना है, या ये impact हमने create करना है, so अकेले तो हम कर नहीं सकते, तो why don't we look at who else can support us? So that comes to partnerships, right? And I think back to that point. Ayesha, what's your view? What can we do collectively as a community to achieve goal 2?
I think really being conscious of taking our government effort on setting an agriculture policy that is relevant for our farmers. And what is happening in our neighboring country, as we know, is something that we need to make sure we avoid at all costs, right? So there's a big in that scenario. So I think looking at what are the safeguards we can continue making sure at a macroeconomic level provide to our farmers, and really being worried about them. And then in terms of question of distribution, right? And that requires, again, avoiding hoarding, avoiding artificial supply constraints, which is a collective responsibility between private sector and to be regulated by government. So I think a better job and more consciousness and recognizing our moral responsibility there is important. And then third thing is, of course, really looking at supporting some what I call as the immediate band-aid type of measures, whether it is the dastarkhans or school feeding programs. If you're employing large workforce who can't afford a proper meal a day when they're working on your premises 8 to 10 hours a day, the least you can give them is a nutritious meal, so that the minimum calorie intake that's required in Pakistan are calorie-based. Towards that minimum, I think that's a responsibility we can all take care of.
Okay, great. So again, clearly there's partnerships to be had, right? And again, Ayesha, you're saying from policy level as well, discussion and dialogue with policymakers as well is important. To your point, Salman, that we need to look beyond what we can do as individuals and think, so just two final points before we wrap up. Like I said, the conversation doesn't stop today. We'll continue karenge. So we talk about working collectively, we talk about partnerships, and we've understood that and it's okay, that's fine. This is all about working together, and we're all about uniting business and collective impact or shared value. Ayesha, for those people that are listening in who are thinking, you guys are great, you're doing great work, hum inko support karna chahte, what are the three key things that you need from a partnership? And be very open and specific, because you might have some donors listening as well. Awesome people that can facilitate those conversations, at least anyway. So if you look, what's your ideal partner or ideal partnership that you're looking for, and what are the three things that you need most of right now?
I think our mission in Pakistan to meet our SDG targets are so huge, and our call for action and resources is always there, ever present. So if you're a donor or philanthropist listening to this, or a corporate entity, we'd love to partner with you. In any other capacity, or just have a bright idea, an innovative idea, and you think you can solve any problem related to the SDGs, we're open for business and would love to hear from you. We invest a lot in R&D at PPAF, and do invest in PK.
Thanks, Ayesha. I think so. Maybe we can jointly host a chai shai coffee shopy type, gupshup with some potential partners. Salman, what type of partners are you looking for? Obviously, you come from a different perspective, but still relevant anyway. Working together is always great. What type of partners are you looking for, and what are the three things that you could do with?
We look towards partnership in areas where we believe we don't have good expertise in, because at the end of the day, our business is to do business, and the business of the business is to do business. So we're not into education, we're not into entrepreneurship. So partnerships has always been the key in most of our initiatives, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of health, education. I mean, like I said earlier, we partnered with the Citizens Foundation, where we thought they were doing an amazing job. And we invested a lot in 3 purpose-built campuses in Karachi and Kasba, Gujarat. And there are several other examples in this area. So in future and years to come, we will still be looking towards working with partners who come with a particular set of expertise. So we will not be interested in reinventing the wheel, rather than helping people towards achieving a common goal. And if someone else has achieved that skill, then why reinvent the wheel then? So this is our motto, and we'll try to stick it that way.
Sounds good. So enhancing what's already working and scaling that up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
absolutely.
Final kind of moment of reflection, and this is just me throwing it back at you. So we have what's left of this decade to achieve the SDGs, 10 saal reh gaye, 9 saal reh gaye, to achieve the 2030 agenda. I should just go back to you, and Salman, a moment of extra time for reflection. what does your 2030 look like? So, आपके लिए 10 साल के अंदर ये सारे मसले हल हो जाते हैं. What does your 2030 look like? You wake up one morning and you think, oh yeah, 1st January 2030. What is the world that you see? What's your wish?
My wish is that I wouldn't be working in this sector because there wouldn't be any poverty left to alleviate.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Salman, what's your 2030 like?
I guess my 2030, I wish would be looking towards even an upgraded challenge. I'd be जैसे Maslow's hierarchy of needs में से हम कहीं ऊपर किसी और लेवल सेल्फ एक्चुअलाइजेशन की तरफ पहुंच जाए. सेल्फ एक्चुअलाइजेशन तो आई एम नॉट श्योर कि वीड बी एबल इन मेरी लाइफ टाइम में शायद अचीव हो पाए, बट देन वी अचीव समवेयर. द ओनली थिंग दैट वुड मेक मी हैप्पी इज दैट आवर current conditions are not exactly the way that they would be in future. They would be better, a better world, more educated people, more entrepreneurs. I mean, a more economic stability, so that people can look towards next plan B.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so to me that would be a remarkable future.
Wow, fantastic. Ayesha, Salman, it's been really helpful and valuable listening to your views on your journey of the SDGs. आपने बहुत सारी चीजें शेयर की और मज़ीद और बातें भी हमने करनी. So we'll continue the conversations. As I said, the conversation doesn't stop today. It will carry on in many different forms. For those listening in and for listening later on the recorded session, अगर आपने partner करना है, if you're thinking about the SDGs and you're thinking about, okay, yeah, I want to do something around this issue of hunger and food and poverty and all the issues around it, then you have Salman and Ayesha who are champions on Goal 2. Feel free to reach out to them either directly through LinkedIn or through us at the Global Compact Network in Pakistan. Remember, if you're posting any social media related photos, messages, content, tweeting or whatever else that we do in this day and age where technology enables us to reach out far and wide, remember to use the hashtags Uniting Business, Lead the World by Example, and obviously Global Compact Network Pakistan. We'll be back this time next month for goal number 3, where we're talking with some more of Pakistan's champions on the SDGs and what SDG 3 means and some of the solutions around that. We're also back next week for the first of our Regional in Conversation series, where we've teamed up with UN Global Compact Nigeria and your UN Global Compact UAE. So I'll be joined by Rachel and Naomi for that session. Interesting session where we're talking about force for good. So we've got a lot of stuff happening over the next couple of months. We'll be talking to Salman and Ayesha, obviously, again, throughout the course of the year on this and many other subjects as well. If you would like to be a participant and share your views and thoughts on what you're doing on the SDGs, drop Nida a message through info@gcnp.org.pk or through Facebook or through LinkedIn. Or reach out to any of us and we'll look at having you on board as well. Guys, thanks very much. Like I say, it's been really valuable and helpful. I had lots of great comments coming through as well. That's all we have time for, and we look forward to speaking to you again over the course of the year and hearing more about the great work that you're doing to help move the 2030 agenda forward. So take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon, inshallah.
Yeah, same to you. Take care.
Thank you very much.